So today marks 75 years since the Nakba, the catastrophe, began in Palestine. And to help us kind of understand what it's been like ever since then, we're going to be going through Ghassan Kanafani's book, Men in the Sun and Other Palestinian Stories. So as we were just talking about before the recording started, how have we let 75 years go on of this, and what is the relevancy of the Nakba today? Why is it important to center and to hear the voices of the Palestinians themselves? To help us do all that, we're going to be reviewing this book, and I'm going to be talking with Asma, my colleague from MPACUK UK. So Asma, what are your thoughts overall on this book?
So I think we need to understand the author and his perspective. Ghassan himself, he was a Palestinian who was made exile, and he lived most of his life in Lebanon, and he was assassinated in Lebanon as well by Mossad. He fought every single day since the day of the Nakba for the freedom of the Palestinian people, and I think when you read this book, that really resonates in each of the stories that he's portraying. You know, the passion that goes into it, the words, you know,
Do you have a favorite from this?
my favorite from this, it has to be the is it the orange one that we're just
The Land of Sad Oranges.
the land of
Yeah,
Sun
yeah.
Oranges. It was a time where obviously the Nakba had just happened. People were in a limbo state, like they didn't know what was going on, what was going to happen, what was happening, why it's happening to them, because to them, in their eyes, like, you know, they welcomed the people who were made refugees from Europe, and for them to come to turn around everything and then point their guns towards them, kill their people, commit massacre, genocide, ethnic cleansing, they just were in a state of constant sadness because they
And it
didn't
was
know.
more than that as well. There's a couple of quotes when I was reading.
Yeah.
So one of them is basically when the family, a Palestinian family, they used to own a orange orchard, I think they're called. They've been kicked out, and they see the Arab armies go in to liberate Palestine. So, you know, they're yelling at each other, get up and see for yourself as the Arab armies enter Palestine. But then there's a quote just a few paragraphs later, the communiques deceived us, and then the truth in all its bitterness cheated us. So it wasn't just seeing these Jewish migrants who came in and then became their new neighbors, destroying their homes. It was also the Arabs who were supposed to be coming to help them. You know, I mean, evaluating what the heck the Arab armies of Jordan and Egypt and etc. were really trying to do. That would take a whole other conversation. But the fact is that they failed miserably in terms
They
of
felt the knife at both ends.
so stabbed at the back and the front. More than
So they were stabbed at the front from European colonizers, and they were stabbed in the back by their own Arab brothers and sisters.
so as sad as this story is, why is it your favorite in this anthology?
I think because it brings a lot of raw emotion, because you know you can understand what was going on at the time. You know, there's one thought that I've always had growing up is like, why did the surrounding Arab nations not come and help the Palestinians? Why did they not come and protect Masjid al-Aqsa? And then when you read that, you think, oh my God, like that's what they did, and that really hits home.
I think that the titular book, story, Men in the Sun, which is obviously like the first and the main story in this, it's the longest one. When I was reading it, like the impression that I was getting, similar to what you were saying, was that the non-Palestinian Arabs, their focus seemed to be like, what can we get out of these refugees who are desperate for my help? So, you know, one of the characters, I think his name's Assad, he recollects how the smugglers, the guides, whatever you want to call them, they kept dumping him halfway along the route and say, oh yeah, don't worry, it's only a little bit further, and then they'd bugger off as they obviously take his money, and so he becomes quite a paranoid person and so on. And the others as well, the others who are involved in the story, they have similar experiences, similar stories of just being taken advantage of. And they finally get to Basra in South Iraq in this story, and the last people smuggler that they talk to is just described as a fat man. It's just like, the fat man laughed, the fat man yelled, the fat man hit, etc. And like, it's really interesting that the person who finally does actually try to help them is another Palestinian who's moved out, made his own way in life, and so on. And it's all of the stories really touching, but the first story being the first in the anthology, it sets the tone, and the tone right at the end of the story is he's so grief stricken, this fellow Palestinian who's trying to help them, that, like, spoiler alert, they die. He's so grief stricken that he just demands of the corpses, why didn't you knock on the side of the tank? Why? And for him, it's really interesting because the last few pages sort of like focus on him as he's driving, and you get to understand his backstory better. And it seems like he's given up on everything. Like it's really, really obvious that he's even given up on God. So like that's a sort of a rhetorical device to sort of show that he's given up on everything. The only thing he cares about anymore is making money, and yet this is undermined, this is subverted in the pure grief that he's feeling when he's pulling the bodies out, and he realizes that they deserve a human burial, not just to be dumped in the desert like other non-Palestinian Arab guides probably would have done. So like that really sets the tone. This is from the beginning to end, it's a grief-stricken book, and it's really humanizing. Sorry,
it really hits home because it's a first-hand account of stories that Ghassan had heard himself. It was a part of history because I was explaining earlier before we started this podcast, a lot of stories got lost because it's Chinese whispers. So-and-so said, so-and-so said, so-and-so said, and they add their like extra masala in along the way, the extra spices, this, that, and the other. So, the actual rawness is lost of that story. But within this book, it was written 40 odd years ago, but it still resonates today. Why? Because it's the truth. It's coming from a person that experienced this real hand, who fought for Palestinian liberation. And if there's one thing that you can take away from this book is that Ghassan until the end fought for Palestinian liberation, and he wanted nothing else more other than freedom for his people. And you can really hear that and read that in the words that he's put across. And something else that I said about this book as well is that obviously when he wrote this book, it was in Arabic. So sometimes some of the stories you're trying to read, and you'll have to read between the lines, because when you translate Arabic to English or any kind of foreign language to another language, it kind of loses its bounce. So you have to kind of read between the lines of what the author's actually trying to say. But with most of the stories in there, you literally feel like you're there and you experience those stories.
I mean, I have to say, like, a huge credit to the translator individual or the translating team, because this book does an amazing job of like humanizing. Because it's really easy. Like, I've never physically been to Palestine. I read reports.
Probably won't get to go, would we?
Or if we have to go through Israel, they'll probably ban us. But in terms of like reports, video clips, photos, statistics, numbers, etc., it's really, I mean, even photos and videos, they're images that you see for a few seconds or a few minutes on screen. But what you don't get, obviously, from any of that is that this is a human being who has a backstory. And they have their dreams, they have their hopes, they have their hates, they have their depressions. But what this book does a fantastic job, like echoing down from history, is humanizing the individuals whose lives have been destroyed and still continue to be destroyed by the Nakba. And you mentioned the land of sad oranges. Something that I took away from that was, this really does speak about the generation between, like obviously up to a certain point in history, Palestine, the Palestinians were there living their lives, fulfilling their futures and so on. And then beyond a certain point, Palestinians were refugees in their own homeland. if not, kicked out and part of the international diaspora. That means that in between, obviously, there was a destruction, not just in terms of like property and not just in terms of body, but in terms of the human spirit as well. Because you can't go from having a home, having a sense of future, your children, your studies, your fruit groves, etc., to like living in a refugee camp. You can't, yeah, not just nothing, like having no sense of having anything again. That's less than nothing, you know what I mean? So the land of sad oranges, it really helps you understand this is what these living people went through, and this is what the process of breaking down was. Because like there's almost a before and after in the story itself as well. Like in the before, it's talking about how sad they all were about losing their orange groves, and how optimistic they were when the Arab armies came in, and how disappointed they were when the victories didn't come, and so on. And then there's a turn in the story, and the turn in the story is that the father figure, he just snaps, and he pulls out a revolver. And before he's able to use it, the mother figure, I think the mother figure is the writer's aunt or something. Anyway, the mother figure hurries all of them out of the room before he can get the revolver out, and then she helps him de-escalate. But that was the turning point. And then after that, the children are like, we don't complain. When we're told to go outside to help relieve the stress inside, we just go outside. And that was the generation where they learnt to internalize the trauma. And like you have to read it to understand it. Like there's no report, there's no statistic that is really going to help you understand that this is what it means to become a refugee.
Yeah, it's not a numbers game. Like one thing about the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause, people have lost the whole kind of heart of the situation through always focusing on numbers and this and that and this politics and that politics. But you actually forget this is a humanitarian issue. It's not a Muslim issue. It's not a Christian issue. It's not a Jewish issue. This is a humanitarian issue. When you have people who are being oppressed, who are being ethnically cleansed, who have a genocide on their hands on modern day history, and nothing is being done about it, you have to kind of understand where this is coming from. And we have been desensitized to the situation. We have been desensitized from the killings and the murder and the mass killings.
Yeah.
It's been 150 days from the beginning of this year, and it's over 150 Palestinians have been killed. Does that not say anything to you? And why have these mainly been young men and children?
And that might also speak to why there's a question. There's a question out there which is like the Nakba is an historical event. It's done, it's dusted. Why should we care? And that is part of the problem of divorcing the humanity from the humans who suffered through the Nakba. Because the reality is the ideology which enabled the Nakba to happen, i.e. Zionism, the ideology that enabled it to happen, that has been silencing its critics and therefore justifying it in the first place and justifying its repercussions since, that ideology still exists. And if we see historical events as numbers, as some, quotations, etc., and then we compartmentalize that, then it's really, really easy to realize that this can all happen again. If not to the same physical extent, then at least in terms of like people being destroyed, people having their lives destroyed, and then a justification being made for it after. Because we're still living with the repercussions of the Nakba. And when I say we, I do mean people outside of Palestine, people who've never been to Palestine, and so on. Like in the UK right now, sorry, this is going off on a tangent. Pull me in if you have to. But in the UK, we had a real good chance of either really good leadership under Jeremy Corbyn, or at least an effective opposition under Jeremy Corbyn. And that guy got stabbed in the back by his own party because of the Zionist lobby, because of there's reports and stuff you can look into. So what does that mean? Sorry to bring the tangent back to a close. What that means is that Zionism is still really effective in the modern day and age at destroying a national, at destroying a separate government's, a separate country's, sorry, political capability and capacity of maintaining its own people's interest. What I mean by that is, if an opposition leader is taken down because he's anti-Zionist or pro-Palestine or whatever, and that brings down the quality of life of its own citizens, how are we not still living in the repercussions of the Nakba, in the repercussions of Zionism growing and flexing its muscles and so on?
But I'm gonna add, Nakba never ended. The Nakba is not a fossilized trauma in history. The Nakba is an ongoing settler
Settler colonial?
settler colonial
Yeah.
genocide, ethnic cleansing to displace Palestinian people, regardless if they're Muslim, regardless if they're Christian, regardless if they're Jewish. And it is ongoing in history today. It's not a fossilized moment. It's not like it's done and dusted and we're now reaping those repercussions. We're reaping the repercussions of an ongoing Nakba. It's never ended. And it's how many more years are we going to allow this to happen as an Ummah? Like, okay, it's not, if we're saying it's not like a humanitarian issue as Muslims, how much longer are we going to allow Muslims to die for the sake of being Palestinian? They are protecting Masjid al-Aqsa with their blood. They say, Bidam Biroh Naftik Ya Aqsa, which means with my blood, with my spirit, with my soul, I protect Al-Aqsa. That's what they say every single time that you hear them chanting. That's what you hear them chant. As a Muslim person, you say, I'm just going to make dua for them. Forget you, bro. Like, you're going to make dua for them. What else are you going to do? You think God's going to come and change your situation by just doing that?
Yeah, I
God
mean, it's
says
really...
that we put out a post this weekend which said, those of you who act justly are close, are invest in piety.
Something like that, yeah.
That's a quote from the Quran. I don't know the exact same words. I don't know the exact same ayah, but quote from the Quran is that those of you who act justly are those who are greater in piety. What does that say to you? That says to you that God asks you to act just. If you have to, every single one of us, man, woman and child, will be answerable for the Palestinian people on the Day of Judgment. You tell me what you're going to tell Allah on the Day of Judgment when you have to answer for what did you do to help the Palestinian people. And, there's groups of people out there, I'm not going to name names. They turn around and always rebuke us, we're telling people to get politically active, but politics is haram and you're in a kuffar system, this, that, and that. Why the hell are you living in this country?
Something to add to that as well is any critics of like what we're doing, what others are doing in terms of trying to help the people of Palestine be liberated from the Zionists. Like critics who say that's never going to work. Like, firstly, what are you doing? Firstly, what do you think is going to work? And then secondly, what have you done? What have you been working on? Because if the answer to either of those questions is like nothing, then you're just insincere.
Yeah.
And your insincerity is worse than useless. Your insincerity, your inaction, it's not even inaction, your stubbornness to be an obstacle in other people's efforts for the Palestinians, it's actively harmful. It's actively harmful.
Do you know there's a generation of people with this whole Palestine issue that won't even share Palestinian posts because they don't want to come across as extreme? What's extreme is that you can be a witness, and you are a witness to genocide. You're being a witness to ethnic cleansing, and you're doing absolutely nothing about it. That's what you're a witness to. That's what you're an actual extremist to. So, it's okay if they die because they're in a different land, they're not bothering me, I'm in a different country. No, you'll be answerable for it on the Day of Judgment. And go ahead.
Yeah, and the thing to remember is also that those who hate Muslims see the Zionist lobby, the Zionist successes and so on as a playbook for them to replicate themselves. So the most obvious example is the Hindutva lobby, which has just exploded in the past decade or so. in this country, and like it's exploded almost literally on the streets of Leicester we saw last year. But we have to realize that their playbook is the Zionist playbook, in terms of lobbying power, in terms of utilizing latent Islamophobia in the media and politics to further their own agenda, and fanning the flames of Islamophobia, so then their own message resonates more, because like it's only hatred that allows Zionism or Hindu extremism to make sense. But to sort of like bring it back to the book, we've talked about
No, you know
the land of sand, origins, and men in the sun.
This is all relevant to
Yeah.
the book, because everything Ghassan stood for was for the liberation of the people, and he had the same fight on his hand that we have today, is trying to convince people that they have to do something for Palestine, right? Think about it this way. How did Zionism become so powerful? It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen, in a couple of days or it happened over years. They learned to become a part of systems, a part of political systems, a part of political ideologies. If you could learn anything from this, is that if you could actually become politically active, if you learn to hold leaders to account, okay, you don't want to get politically active, learn to hold leaders to account, your masjid to account, your MPs to account, then you would actually understand that how you can make a change without having to think that there's only one, there's another sect of people who believe that the only solution, that's it, the only solution to helping the Palestinian people is going to war. How's that going to help you? The other side is so much more advanced in weaponry. They're going to kill you in 2 days. Like, that's the most stupidest thing I've ever heard. If you learn, did the Zionists go to war? No, they didn't. They learned to become a part of the solution by becoming a part of systems, a part of becoming educational systems, about infiltrating education, infiltrating political systems, political ideologies. Can we not learn to do the same thing? So
The key thing, the key thing is that the Palestinians have their liberation, and that is on their own terms.
Exactly.
And they were not so in 1947 to 1948, that was when the British Mandate ended, and what the Zionists did in preparation for that was ethnic cleansing. Plan D, Plan Dalit, or Operation Dalit, where they basically cleansed villages that were in or near the Israeli zones of control. And, Deir Yassin, the massacre at Deir Yassin kind of epitomized that. Literally massacring so many Palestinians and then letting the news spread, so then Palestinians of their own volition would then leave. And, this was all done thanks to the meddling of the British Mandate at the time, and this was all done with the Palestinians on the back foot, because they had no intention to cleanse the land themselves of these Europeans who were coming in, thanks to other European meddling across Europe. So, what anyone wants is just the liberation of Palestine on Palestine's terms. And I think that in terms of this book being a really good way of
it's an eye opener.
Of really understanding the spirit of the Palestinians, like down down echoing down from history. There's two stories that really, really helped me understand that. One is Saad, and one is the letter from Gaza.
That was a really sad story.
Yeah, which one do you think?
Letter from Gaza. There's so many points in this book where I had to put it down and just cry, because it just hurt your heart, and you just think what did these people have to go through? What are they having to go through every single day, still today? And you've got stupid people turning around and telling you dumb stuff like just make dua, Allah's going to make it better. Seriously, it makes me angry, but it also upsets me a lot, because I just think if we carry on with this mindset, it's going to be another 75 years. How many Palestinians have died this week? So this is the week commencing of the 9th of May. There have been over 50 casualties in Palestine with the bombing of Gaza, bombing of Rafah, checkpoint murders. You know, there are 2 Palestinian brothers that were murdered at checkpoint, just for this, like, for what? For what? For what? For nothing. You know, they've lost their lives for nothing. But there's one thing that the Palestinian people always put through, and that is their spirit and their heart, and they will always fight, and they'll continue to fight for their freedom, for justice, for equality. You know, the way that they're treated by the Amnesty International report, it said it itself, it is an apartheid state. Did apartheid not happen 50 years ago with Nelson Mandela? Did he not fight for his freedom? And Nelson Mandela himself said, our freedom is not complete without the freedom of the Palestinian people.
The Letter from Gaza story chapter, it really does help understand or start to understand the Palestinian spirit, because you're not really truly going to understand it unless you've lived it and experienced it yourself. So a few quotes. So basically the Letter from Gaza, it's like the writer, the viewer, starts from one point of view, and the letter, as all letters are really, is a communication to someone, and he's just trying to communicate to his friend who's moved over out of the country. He's trying to communicate to his friend, like, even though we both had dreams of leaving Gaza, I can't leave. And this letter is his explaining his journey to that destination. And some of the quotes, like he said, I hated Gaza and its inhabitants. Everything in the amputated town reminded me of failed pictures painted in grey by a sick man. Why didn't we leave this defeat with its wounds behind us and move on to a brighter future that would give us deeper consolation? So that's where he and his friend were at the start of their, youth and so on. But then he experiences a shock to his system, which is seeing his own niece basically injured because she had dived across the bodies of her younger siblings to protect them from a bombing campaign that the Israelis had launched. And she'd ended up so injured that she'd had to have her leg amputated. And like a couple of quotes near the end, everything in this Gaza throbbed with sadness, which was not confined to weeping. It was a challenge. More than that, it was something like reclamation of the amputated leg. And that's where you start to get a hint of understanding for the Palestinians who have lost so much. They don't want to lose any more. And the only way to stop losing even more than what they have already have is to have a spirit of resistance. You know, existence literally is resistance. Existence is resistance. And, these aren't just words that you can throw around and so on. They've lost so much. They don't want to lose any more. And the only way that they can guarantee that they won't lose any more is to carry on the resistance that their loved ones have handed over to them over the generations. And
carry on the message, isn't it?
Yeah, and the story closes. But I just want to this line, it just really hit me. I won't come to you, but you return to us. Come back to learn from Nadia's leg, his niece, to learn from Nadia's leg, amputated from the top of the thigh, what life and what existence is worth. Come back, my friend. We are all waiting for you. And I'm no literature analyst, but this isn't just one friend talking to his other friend. Through this medium of this letter and this story, he's saying, this is what this is what our homeland is saying to us. Come back to me, learn what life is, learn what existence is. We're all waiting for you. So, the land of Palestine, obviously it's special for many reasons. It's the Holy Land. It's the land where many of the Sahabiyat, many prophets, alayhim salam, are buried. And it's also the land that has been watered with the blood of the Palestinians since the Nakba and since time immemorial. It's just such a powerful and simple way of understanding what was the Nakba, what is the Nakba, what does it mean to be Palestinian and to resist, even in the face of imminent failure.
There's one thing that during COVID, and that's the one thing that came out from COVID, was people's perception of the Palestinian people changed because of TikTok. and only because of TikTok, when people started sharing stories, and it's about sharing Palestinian stories and sharing what's happening in Palestine, and TikTok had an amazing non-filter at the time of a Palestinian story going out, and it sent a wave of opinion to change, and it's the first time in 75 years.
So just going to wrap up by pointing out the book that we're going to be reading for next month, inshallah. It's The Holocaust Industry by Norman G. Finkelstein. So The Holocaust Industry. And yeah, read along with us and share your thoughts of next month's book on the next month's podcast. And if you have also read Ghassan Kanafani's Men in the Sun, please do share your thoughts on this book as well and what you took away from it. And if it's been a while since you read it or you've never read it before, definitely do pick it up and have a look at it yourself. Inshallah, next month we're going to be covering, we're going to do a deeper dive into what created Israel and what that means for the Palestinians. That's what we're going to hope to get out of this book, inshallah. Any final thoughts?
No, I think obviously it boils up a lot inside, and I think it just feels very emotional. So I think it's better if I stay quiet, because I'm going to say something very harsh and I don't want to.
Yeah, well, not on camera anyway.
And you have to remember as well, like, before we point any fingers to anybody, always look at yourself first. You humble yourself first in the situation. Don't be like, oh, you're wrong and you're this and you're that. Go look at yourself, see why you're saying what you're saying, research into what you're actually, looking at. Remember, it's opinions are always formed into our head by other people and other situations and environments. It's about time you start forming your own opinions, getting your own perspective on this situation and how we can actually put a viable. We will never be able to fix the situation anymore. It's gone far beyond that. But how we can better the situation for the Palestinian people.
Yeah, form your own opinions, and information is power, which is the name of this podcast. So yeah, go read a book, read along with us. Next month's book, The Holocaust Industry by Norman Finkelstein.
And something else about that as well is learn to how you need to. A lot of people, when they see like anti-Palestinian rhetoric and stuff, you see them making death threats and this and that. Don't do that. Learn to control your emotions. Learn to channel your emotions and that anger and that frustration, that it is a successful outcome rather than something that's just going to get you into trouble and not do anything.
Yeah, I mean, nothing successful got built by destroying something. Exactly. I mean, look at Israel. Israel is built on the destruction of Palestine, and it's a failed state. It's a failed state that survives because of handouts from the US and on the blood of the Palestinians. It's like a great example of how destruction does not build anything. Okay, so on that point, let's wrap this up. Inshallah, see you at the next one.
If that says anything to you, is that change can happen with the most smallest of actions, sharing stories, talking about them, not forgetting about them. Palestine isn't a trend. It's not a trend that you all want to jump on a bandwagon because it's currently trending at the moment. So, let me get some pictures, let me get some posts out, let me jump on that wave to get some extra followers and likes. It's not about that. What it's about is putting their story across. When you're using their images and their pictures and their videos, explain what is going on. There was a story that happened this week where Israel had been bombing Gaza, and they purposely targeted the director of a hospital, and they thought they had killed his entire family, but there was only one member of his family that actually was left, and that's his 7-year-old daughter. And that's it. She lost everybody. She lost her mum, she lost her dad, she lost her siblings. Everyone gone in just a second. So if you're sharing these videos, and I'm seeing these videos of just her crying, but you're not putting any context across, that's not sharing the story. Share the story. She's just been made an orphan because of this. And it's so important not to play Chinese whispers with their stories, because, again, with stories like this, you need to add the context. She paid for her life, the land with her leg. What is that telling you? She's paid it with her body, with her blood. So use their words, use their stories, for a purpose of actually reaching a bigger audience. So, opinions of Palestine can start changing and we can start making the change.
Speaking of families, the family of the doctor and the family of this now orphan, there's a chapter in this book called Saad. In this book, it's just an excerpt from the longer novel, but it's and like this whole book as a whole is really, really good in terms of understanding the Palestinian mind and the Palestinian resistance. This one is really good because it helps you understand like each individual that you hear about. They're not just statistics. They're not just an individual with an individual story. They've got a family. Yeah, they've got a whole family behind them. And what's really interesting about the Saad chapter is that let's call it the viewer who the point of view is written from, it seems to be deliberately written from a little bit of I don't know if naive or what's the word when you're separated from a aloof kind of situation. The viewer obviously isn't seeing it from the point of view of someone who has suffered a lot and wants to sacrifice for their life to have deeper meaning. So the mum that the viewer is talking with, the mum is talking about how her son has joined the Fedayeen, which I think is the resistance fighters and so on. And the viewer's immediate view of the mum was that the mum must have been upset by this. The quote is, I was still gazing at her hands, folded palms upwards like two disappointed creatures, crying out from the heart, chasing the man who was leaving everything for danger and the unknown. But this is just projection, because the mum explains to the viewer that, no, I'm not disappointed that he's gone. He told me time ago that he was going to go. I'm just letting you know. And then the viewer sort of like corrects her projection and quote, I doubted whether they were really lamenting the hands, which apparently had been lamenting before. So we know straight away that, this is a way, again, it's another rhetorical device. This is a way for this story to tell me that my perspectives are going to be subverted or changed through this story. So the viewer is supposed to be us, our neutral or inexperienced, naive point of view. We would assume that a mother would be absolutely torn apart by her son going to join a resistance. But instead, the mum says, I told my neighbour this morning, I wish I had 10 like him. And then the conversation continues to like the mum saying, I want to go tell the commander that, look after him, look out for him. And the viewer, again, kind of naively points out, quite fairly points out that, if you tell the commander to look after one guy, that means that the commander's not going to send him out to fight because he's going to leave him to be safe at home for his mum. And then the mum reflects on that. And I watched a mother's perplexity and torment in her eyes and hard hands. And what the mum finally says is, you know what, I'm going to go tell the commander that if he doesn't get his way, he gets upset. So if he wants to go out and fight, push him to go out and fight. And this really helps you as a reader understand that the experience of the Palestinians is very, very different from what you might have experienced in your own life, and that they have a strongly knit connection with each other and to each other's and to their nation's liberation as well. It's really, really tightly knit to the point that it seeps into the love that a mother has for her child. If her child wants to go and help liberate Palestine, then her love doesn't become defensive, it becomes a facilitating kind of love. And again, that helps us understand that this is something that has become a part of Palestinian culture. We, as someone who's never been to Palestine, who's never had to witness, except through video clips and so on, and those are just tiny little snippets. I marvel at the spirit of the Palestinian spirit of resistance. This book really helps you understand, read through it, understand, absorb it, see it from the viewer's point of view. And Ghassan Kanafani it speaks a lot to his writing and to the translation work that despite it being written in a completely different language, 60, 70 years ago, he still does an amazing job in terms of guiding you through and into the shoes of a Palestinian and understanding what it means to be Palestinian. Unfortunately, the situation is the same, 75 years on. So unfortunately, these experiences are still relevant, still speak to what the Palestinians are relating to today. Have you got any final thoughts on the book? I think I've covered everything.
Not just the book, but from the pages of the book and from the Palestinian people, if they tell you one thing, is that to remember them, to remember their history, to remember their future, to visit them, share their stories, go and see what life is like for them, and go and visit Masjid al-Aqsa. It's the third holiest place in Islam. As Ahmed said, most of our prophets were there. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our last and final prophet, that's where he ascended to the heavens. It's where Isa alayhi salam will return. So if it means anything to the Muslims, it means that you are to remember their land, you're to remember the people, you're to remember that, they are closer to you in brother and sisterhood than anybody else. Any other Muslim across the world, regardless of borders, of nationalities, that doesn't matter. What matters is that these people are our people, they're our brothers and sisters, and they need our help. So share their message, share their stories, and just remember them.
So just going to wrap up by pointing out the book that we're going to be reading for next month, inshallah. It's The Holocaust Industry by Norman G. Finkelstein. So The Holocaust Industry. And read along with us and share your thoughts of next month's book on the next month's podcast. And if you have also read Ghassan Kanafani's Men in the Sun, please do share your thoughts on this book as well and what you took away from it. And if it's been a while since you read it or you've never read it before, definitely do pick it up and have a look at it yourself. Inshallah, next month we're going to be covering, we're going to do a deeper dive into what created Israel and what that means for the Palestinians. That's what we're going to hope to get out of this book, inshallah. Any final thoughts?
No, I think obviously it boils up a lot inside, and I think it just feels very emotional. So I think it's better if I stay quiet because I'm going to say something very harsh, and I don't want to.
Yeah, well, not on camera anyway.
And you have to remember as well, like before we point any fingers to anybody, always look at yourself first. You humble yourself first in the situation. Don't be like, oh, you're wrong and you're this and you're that. Go look at yourself. See why you're saying what you're saying. Research into what you're actually, looking at. Remember, it's opinions are always formed into our head by other people and other situations and environments. It's about time you start forming your own opinions, getting your own perspective on this situation and how we can actually put a viable. We would never be able to fix the situation anymore. It's gone far beyond that. But how we can better the situation for the Palestinian people.
Yeah, form your own opinions, and information is power, which is the name of this podcast. So go read a book, read along with us. Next month's book, The Holocaust Industry by Norman Finkelstein.
And something else about that as well is learn to how you need to. A lot of people, when they see like anti-Palestinian rhetoric and stuff, you see them making death threats and this and that. Don't do that. Learn to control your emotions. Learn to channel your emotions and that anger and that frustration, that it is a successful outcome rather than something that's just going to get you into trouble and not do anything.
Yeah, I mean, nothing successful got built by destroying something. Exactly. I mean, look at Israel. Israel is built on the destruction of Palestine, and it's a failed state. It's a failed state that survives because of handouts from the US and on the blood of the Palestinians. It's like a great example of how destruction does not build anything. Okay, so on that point, let's wrap this up. Inshallah, see you at the next one.